I'm Yves Dejaeghere. I'm the Executive Director of the Federation for Innovation in Democracy Europe. FIDE is an organization that wants to provide resources for policymakers, NGOs wanting to engage with citizen participation in a qualitative way, mostly through deliberative democracy. And so many people are going into these models, trying them out, and FIDE wants to help them with resources to make their processes better. This is still a new and evolving field, and so many people are looking for these types of resources from neutral actors, and that's actually what FIDE tries to provide at a European level. I think both belonging, if you think about belonging and citizen participation, it's a two-way field. Yes, the idea of citizenship makes you want to participate, and participation is the action of that belonging. So I think both of these things are very much connected to each other. I mean, I'm sitting here in Italy where, for example, there's a long tradition, for example, in Florentine Renaissance, where, you know, there's this, I think Bruni said that the shoemaker in Florence can say to the nobleman, I'm a citizen of Florence too. Why? Because he could participate in the business of the city. And so both the participation and the identity and the belonging are very much linked. What means belonging to a polis if you have no say and you have no participation in it? And vice versa, if you participate but there is no identification with what you're doing it for. So they are actually, for me, two sides of the same coin. The one doesn't create the other. They are pretty much interlinked. If you think about what can be done better, first of all, you have to look at what is done. And there's a lot happening at the European level. If you look at in a few years, they've set up a Have Your Say website. Actually, citizens can very often, actually on most European regulation, give their ideas in this website. There are consultations. Most citizens don't know them, but so the EU is improving, and that's for me the most important thing. At whatever level, starting something new is trying things. The thing is to always, every iteration, try to make it better. And what we see at the European level is with the Conference on the Future of Europe, they've tried for the first time to do this deliberative exercise at above a national level with so many countries, citizens with so many countries participating. And you could focus on all the things that didn't work. But you could also say this was the first time this has happened at such a level. And so that's not perfect, but there's a lot of lessons learned. Now there are 3 citizen panels at the European level, and again, they are not yet completely perfect, so I could focus on everything that could still be done better. But each time there is a new step and a new trial. And the European level of politics is as such, without bringing citizens in, already very difficult. So we should also give a little bit of time to the European level to fit this new, and this is in many levels, have been designed without citizens in mind. And so how institutions can grow and adapt to this, we should also think that they need some time. This has been with every change of institution and every big change in citizen participation, be it voting. It took time to go from small groups voting to, 18-year-olds voting, which in my country was in the 1980s. Finally, it went from 21 to 18. So when people say, the right to vote is from 1830, yeah, for 2% of the population. Women only got to vote in 1947, and it was only brought down to 18, and you could say 16 is even. So it took 120 years. Deliberative democracy is gone from nowhere 15 years ago, where people would blink their eyes if you would mention this, to now the European Commission trying these in citizen panels. This is lightning speed for how institutions normally change. So you can have a glass half full and glass half empty. It's going at breakneck speed, as long as you don't lose ambition. If you know that actually your process is not going well, whatever level you're working at, and you're like, we'll just stick to what we have here, that would be for me very regretful. But anybody trying something new, and some levels are more difficult than others. I think the European is the toughest to suddenly plug citizens in as if it was nothing. So. The administration, I think, you need to talk to your citizens, but also people who work with citizens, because, again, a lot of institutions have been designed without citizens in mind. And so we have to accept that it is a difficult adaptation, both for people working in bureaucracies as well as the political level, to suddenly bring in citizens in the fold. So it is thinking how you can adapt also some of your processes to citizen input. It is rethinking how you make policy with citizens. For example, this is thinking on policy cycles, very big policy levels, except maybe in very small communities. You have a new educational bill, which means every so often you review this whole policy field. That is the moment where you then engage with your stakeholders, citizens. If you do it in between policy cycles, you do this assembly, you might land with loads of recommendations where then both the bureaucracy and the politicians will go like, but we just changed the educational bill and now you come, because policy means investment. If it applies to, for example, staff or let's say teachers, how they work and etc. If you just change that a year ago and you do it. So for example, it's when do you bring citizens in? How do you bring citizens in? Also there, you can't make policy without citizens anymore. And a lot of this is now trying to figure out how this works. And so I think there is a lot of science that has been built up since the 1960s on what participation works, who shows up, who doesn't show up, which needs to be rediscovered, because sometimes mistakes are made out of naivete, like, oh, I want to bring citizens in, and they use a type of citizen participation which is very unequal, but without them intending to do so. And suddenly only men show up in their 50s with higher degrees. But if you've said that this is the way your citizen can co-decide, then suddenly you're actually giving policy space and power to a certain group of citizens. So sometimes you can even create some inequality. So, and even without being malicious, so look at what we know, at what types of participation require what means. What kind of equalities and inequalities are inherent to, and in all of them, even deliberative sortition, we're not perfect. We don't reach everyone. So, and try to see to the extent of your means how much you can adapt to that. Because, and I'll end with that, is sometimes as practitioners we can put the perfect picture there, how to reach the underrepresented, how to do, for example, in our field, your sortition right, and then that is read by somebody who works in a mid-level administration of a small town where there is not even one person who does citizen participation, and for these people, they don't have the resources, the means, the staff, and you would just disillusion some of these people. So it's also a bit seeing what can be done with which resources. A city of Milan can bring resources, staff, time, money that maybe a small town in southern Italy cannot bring. And so doing an assembly there compared to there, how do you also adapt it to certain resources and means you have? Because, and I'll end with that, is bringing these types of citizen participation in and still making them very voluntary from administration to administration could create unequal democracy depending on how much means your city or region has to sustain them. If my city can organize many deliberative processes because I live in a rich city in Northern Europe and you live in a city that hardly has any means and can't organize engaging citizen participation, we have different democracies because my city can afford it and yours cannot. So we also need to think about how higher levels can actually create equality of levels of citizen engagement. That shouldn't be dependent on how rich your region is or what resources your city has or not. It is really to think about inclusion in every step of the way, and this has a lot to do with resources. So very often people will tell us, oh, we want to get these people in the room that we never see, and sometimes a bit blunt I say like, okay, how many resources do you want to put in there? We want to have people in our assembly that maybe be immigrants. But they might not speak your language very well. Will you put money in to translate some things for them? We want people who, with lowly educated, who've never been involved in public engagement. You can bring them in the room, but if you don't coach them, help them, they will just be silent. They'll sit there. They'll feel uncomfortable, and this can go sometimes to the most banal. Like an anecdote from one of the processes we'd been involved in was a truck driver who was worried that he didn't have formal clothing. He didn't have a costume. And if you look at politics on TV, it's men in suits. And so he was invited to an assembly drawn by lot, and he was willing to go, but he thought, like, I cannot dress the right way. And so many people feel that these spaces are not spaces that they actually belong to. Similarly, people who get invited to a civic lottery sometimes say, like, but I'm not an expert in this. They will sometimes reply to the commissioning authority like, well, I cannot go, but my brother, he did university and he will come. So there is a sort of sense that, in being involved in policy requires a certain level of knowledge, and so first of all, this will take time. Rethinking policy very inclusive means that these spaces also become spaces where people feel that they should and could be. And this takes a lot of work. And this is talking to organizations who work with these people. This is asking these people, why would you not consider to come? Why would you consider to come? What is refraining you from coming? And this might be as much as clothing. This might as being taking care of people at home, and you cannot just leave. It's about time. It's about resources. But it's also about what we call a sense of efficacy, that you actually, that I am somebody who can speak up and my opinion counts. Sometimes you really get these people in deliberative spaces who even in their family never speak up when we talk about politics, and so for these people, they really grow up with this is not something I could or have to do, very often women, by the way. And so it is really there's no one trick that does this. It is also about creating societies where we kind of make these people feel like they have an equal say. And this also includes children, by the way. It is taking part in the decisions that will affect you, your family, your neighbors, and it is about being part of a community. That is actually what it is. Being part of a community is to be part of the decisions made in your community. And so we know from research that actually many citizens say, if you ask them, should people be more involved in politics? They say yes. The interesting thing is many people don't think about themselves. And so what I would say to citizens is yes, you want people to be more involved in politics. That person is you. And if there are no means that you see as meaningful to participate, first of all, see a bit what is available, and then try to see who can help you make that available. Because if you feel on your own, try to see if there is somebody out there that can help you make that space. But you are that person that you want involved in politics.